everybody, it's week 10 of the 2017 college football season. It's a huge week. There's several games that are going to mean a lot. You know, anytime you get into November, you start getting around the fact that teams start separating themselves, teams start getting bowl eligible, teams start falling behind, injuries occur, teams that, you know, played better than what they should have all year start to fall, and teams that have kind of played under their capability or above and really have that talent start showing themselves during the month of November. You also start getting into a lot of rivalry games, which mean a lot to a lot of schools and their fan base. So things can happen that probably shouldn't happen a lot of times late in November. This week we've got 7 huge games outside of what I'm going to talk about. LSU, Alabama, Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, Penn State, Michigan State, Arizona, USC, Clemson, North Carolina State, Stanford, Washington State, and what I think the most important game this week out of all those, believe it or not, is Virginia Tech and Miami. I think those two teams, this game is going to decide who wins that side of the division and who will play ultimately, I believe, Clemson in the championship game. So before we go any further, just like always, everything you hear in this video or read in the blog or the website, feel free to use it with whatever you want to, but just keep in mind that all the outcomes I talk about are completely my opinion. Last week, I went 2-1 on 3 that I gave out, including Minnesota, which we had plus 7.5 on the road against Iowa. They lost by 7, so we did cover that by half a point. Florida, Georgia had over 43.5. It was late in the game, but we did cover there. They jumped out to a 21 points scored in the first 7 minutes of that game, and then we had a long time where nothing really happened, a lot of punts, and then right at the end of the third quarter, scoring started to happen, and we did go over. The only loss we had was A&M. We had Texas A&M at home plus 1.5. I really thought they'd come out and play harder than they did. They lost 35-14 at home to Mississippi State. If you followed the leans that I gave out last week at the end of the video, they went 3-1. So all in all, a great week for college. So we look to build upon that once again and keep the season going. This week I've got 3 games and then I believe 3 leans to give out. The first game is Oregon State at Cal. The over-under currently is 56.5, with Cal being the home favorite of 8 points. So last year this game, Cal was upset on the road. They lost to Oregon State. I think it was one of Oregon State's only 3 wins, maybe 4 wins of the year. They did win 47-44. Oregon State's coming off a close game with Stanford last week where they lost 15-14. They were leading for most of the game, and right at the end, they needed one more first down to get to where they could burn the rest of the time off, and just could not get it. They ended up fumbling at the midfield. Stanford took the ball. They drove down 50 yards, scored a touchdown, and got away with a win. This also, like I said, was played on Thursday night, so they had 2 extra days prepared for this game. Now, usually, Oregon State has not been very good for a while. And usually the last few years, they've been really good for one game, and then they kind of go back down. So they got up for Stanford. It was at home on a Thursday night. It was a great opportunity to, you know, impress and just have a good feeling about their season, even though the rest of their season has not gone very well. So with that said, Cal comes off of a loss at Colorado. They lost by quite a bit. They lost, I believe it was 48-28. So, you know, right around 3 touchdowns. So it was on the road. Not a good showing there. But Colorado is also a team that is trying to get back. I actually thought Colorado would go 9-3, but that proved with the loss of their defensive coordinator to Oregon that they couldn't. They've lost 4 games so far. So they're not that bad of a team. I think that they're playing better the last couple weeks than they had the rest of the season. So they're starting to get back. After losing to Washington State a couple weeks ago, they've bounced back and beat Cal. November, like I've talked about earlier with injuries, is big because teams that may have played better than what they should have, they start to get those injuries, and then they really come back down to earth. Oregon State is one of those teams. They played very good last week. They got a lot of players injured during that game, and they've got just a ton of players out overall for this week. Cal has got a few as well. They've got a couple starters out, but not just a ton, so they win that battle. Projected stats, I have Oregon State rushing between 135 to 155 yards, passing between 108 to 200 yards, while I have Cal rushing between 125 to 145 yards and passing between 275 to 295 yards. With that said, Cal has something to play for here. A couple more wins and they get bowl eligible. Oregon State has only won one game all year, so I think they'll start to tank really bad. And with that said, I think Cal minus the 8 is a play here. The next game is another Pac-12 game. It's Oregon against Washington. This is a big-time rivalry game for a long time now. And up until last year, the recent victories have come from Oregon. They pretty much dominated the series while Chip Kelly was there, and really while the next coach was there for most of it until last year, where they lost 70 to 26. So obviously last year was a big year for Washington. They made the playoffs, had a very good team, and they took advantage of it, Oregon being down, and they went to Oregon and won that big as a 9-point favorite. So one thing that factors in is I gave Washington a 2.5-point home field advantage. It's a very loud stadium. It's very good for the home team. It's a very unique stadium, the way they've got it set up there, and I look forward to be big for Washington. Oregon does stand getting their quarterback back this week. Justin Herbert has a chance to come back and play this week, and really without him, they have not been able to pass the ball. So getting him back would be huge, just to get a little bit of a passing game to open up the run a little bit more. If he doesn't get to play, expect them to completely rely on the run like they have the last few weeks, which has been pretty good for them, including last week when they beat Utah. But I think if they get him back, they'll be doing even better. Projected stats, I have Oregon rushing between 150 to 170, passing between 115 to 135. You got UW rushing between 165 to 185, while passing between 135 to 155. The play I'm going to go with here is the underdog on the road, Oregon plus 24.5. I don't think that they'll win the game, but I do think that they'll stay within those 4 scores. And so with that said, we'll move along to the last game we have this week. It's South Carolina on the road against Georgia. Georgia is a 24-point home favorite with an over-under of 49. So last week, while we talked about, Georgia had a huge win, 42-7 against their rival Florida in Jacksonville at the neutral site. This week they're back at home, where they'll be playing a South Carolina team who has done exactly what I thought they would do at the beginning of the season, which is stay under the radar, score just enough points to win games, and play decent defense. You know, Will Muschamp is a big-time defensive coach, so they've done just enough to stay like I thought. USC, or South Carolina, is coming off a homecoming game against Vanderbilt in which they won by 7, 34-27. But if you look at the game and actually pay attention to it, they were leading by more than that, and they just kind of gave up a few garbage time touchdowns, middle of the fourth quarter type things, and almost let Vanderbilt get back in the game there. UGA is in a hunt for a playoff spot, which, you know, they don't want to get anybody hurt, but they want to make a statement. They want to continue their success just enough, and I think over the next few games, to keep from getting anybody hurt, they're going to start subbing a lot more. We've got a ton of running backs. Why not use them, you know, and keep everybody healthy before you get to the end of the year. Last year, Georgia jumped out to a 14-0 lead early, and then nothing really happened with them until the end of the game. They let South Carolina have a few good drives. Late in the game, it was tied up 14-14, and then Georgia did score a touchdown, and then right after that, they got another turnover and scored another touchdown, and that's where the game finished, was 28-14. One huge thing that stands out to me in this game is South Carolina is +9 on turnover margin in Power 5 games. That's not including all their games, but the Power 5 games are +9. And that's why, those reasons are why I would take South Carolina plus a 24.5. I don't think they're going to even get close to winning this game, but if they can just stay within 2 touchdowns, you know, we're well within the spread here, and I think that's very doable. A few leans that stand out: Colorado, Arizona State over 60, Virginia plus 10, and Ole Miss and Kentucky over 60.5. Please check out the NFL video linked in the description. Like, share, and subscribe. And thank you, and see you next week.